Wisconsin Eye is at the Democratic State Convention in Wisconsin Dells. We're talking to Senate Democratic leader Chris Larson. Chris, thanks for talking to Wisconsin Eye. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, it's an election year, and yesterday when I talked to Chairman Tate, he said, and I'm quoting, "We're going to take back the state Senate."
Yeah.
I said, boy, that puts a lot of onus on you.
So you came to fact check it to see if it's true. Yes,
I
it
did.
is, Steve. We are going to take back the majority in the state Senate this
Then
fall.
connects the dots, because the first district he mentioned was the LivenIn District.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Yeah, well, it's an open seat now.
Yes.
Senator LivenIn has decided to run for Congress, has decided to do that. And it seems that he's got, heavy support. That's a whole nother race we're not worried about from the Senate perspective. But he's doing that. So he's left his seat vacant. And this is the second seat that we recruited for. And the recruitment group in Sheboygan and Manitowoc, they stepped forward more than any other six. Everybody stepped up, but this one more than anybody had energized people showing up month after month as we met with them. And they were the ones who looked around their community and they said, who would be the best person to run against Joe LivenIn? And they wanted somebody who had a reputation for working across the aisle, which was important to them, somebody with an independent streak, and somebody who was a leader, who saw problems and stepped up to address those. And the name that they all rallied around was Martha Lanning. Martha, when we first asked her.
She out of Plymouth?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
excuse me.
So she said no. But then her kids, she's a mother of 3, and they said, "Mom, you're talking about this stuff all the time. Like, if you don't do it, we're not going to win that seat." And so she ended up stepping forward and has been a ruthless fundraiser, somebody who's been out there working hard, and somebody who really brings the community together. The story I like to tell is there's a lot of folks I'm sure that Senator LivenIn was going back to get donations from who had been switched over to Martha's campaign and were helping her out instead. So he had a tough campaign on his hand, but now that it's an open seat, and to be clear, this is they have a shallow bench there, and they've got 2 open assembly seats, they've got an open Senate seat, and an open congressional seat. So they're really trying to dig and try and find candidates. And the 2 candidates that are stepped forward so far are people who were rejected by Republican electorate in primaries over the last couple of years. So we're really excited about Martha's chances. I think she really speaks to the heart of that district, somebody who saw problems and addressed them, whether it was starting a school lunch program where it was needed, building a playground where it was needed, or building the intergenerational care center for students and the elderly in our community, raising over $4 million. And that was in the downward slump of the economy. She did that, bringing people together. So that's Martha, and I'd venture to say she's one of the best speakers and best candidates in the state for any office.
Then the second one on Chairman Tate's roster is Senator Ellis, also open.
Yeah.
Chairman Tate's term, Penny Bernard-Shaber is a dream candidate. You agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why?
Because she doesn't back down. Penny is for her size, for her stature, she's short. I think she's probably going to be one of the shortest senators that we've got. But for ounce, she's like a car jack, very powerful, and she doesn't back down. She's somebody who ran for the seat the first time for Assembly back in 06, 07, and she lost. She didn't win it. But then when she ended up running again the next time in 08, she won. She ended up then going on in 2010, which was not a good year for Democrats, retaining that seat. And to be clear, she's the first Democrat to represent that area in over 70 years. So this was not an easy conquest for her. But despite that, she won in 2010. By then, Republicans gave up. Under redistricting, they shifted over to a more heavily Dem seat and said, okay, fine, we'll let her stick around as a state rep. And instead of sticking to that safe seat, she decided to be the first candidate to give up that assembly seat, step forward, and run for state senate against Mike Ellis. And she announced just after July of last year and has been running strong ever since. She's represented more of that district than her opponent has. She has been out there working for signatures in parts of the district where they have not had a competitive campaign in decades. And she's earning votes just because she's showing up and she's talking to them and seeing people eyeball to eyeball.
Dale Schultz, open seat, Southwest Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Now, the numbers have been building for Democrats in that area?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, the district, the people have been shifting more and more Democratic election after election. The last election, when 56 percent for Barack Obama. This is in southwestern Wisconsin.
Right.
What's happening is this district...
In Dale's district, 56 for Obama?
Exactly.
Excuse me for interrupting.
Yeah, no, that's all right. And so Dale Schultz ended up shifting with that district. I think he ended up seeing the ground moving underneath him, and somebody who, you know, once ran against Ron Kind for Congress, somebody who was once the leader of the Republican caucus, was shifting his views, and he was moving over to more progressive standpoints on things like the environment, on making sure that people had the right to unionize if they chose to, and he was shifting on those and being very loud and very vocal. A lot of it was because the district was shifting underneath him. So, but that district has trended more and more Democratic, and I'm confident that we're going to win it this fall. We've got a competitive primary. I think Pat Baumhack is a superior candidate. He's been out there working hard. He was the first Senate Dem to turn in 800 signatures, the maximum, despite getting in even a little bit late. He's somebody we were talking about workout ethics before. He's somebody who has had he had a Stanford scholarship, athletic scholarship. So he brings all of that energy out to the doors, out to the events, which he's gonna, which is needed because it's a large district. And the last piece on that one, Howard Markline is the Republican.
Yes.
To be clear, Howard Markline pushed Dale Schultz out of that district because he wasn't following the state Republican Party plan. And so because of that, there's no way Dale Schultz is going to be supporting Howard Markline. People who think like Dale Schultz, independent to leaning Republican, they're going to be backing folks like Pat Baumhack. They're not going to get behind Howard Markline. So given those trends and given the candidate, I'm confident that we're going to win that seat this fall.
And the final thing, the final one on the list of Chairman Tate was the 1st District, Senator Lassay.
Yeah.
I haven't met your candidate there. Tell me about
Dean DeBrew.
Okay.
Yeah, Dean DeBrew. Dean is pretty great. He's the son of the former mayor of Appleton. He's somebody who's a 40-plus year resident of that district, somebody who lives there now, unlike the incumbent senator who's living down in Racine, who's been living down there since the last election. Only Senator Frank Lassay is the only senator to somehow find a way to live out of a P.O. box.
Doesn't he own a home in Senate District 1?
No.
Okay, he does not. Okay.
No, he does not. He does not. He ended up having to shift his address around. So it'll be interesting to see how he explains this. We've got a complaint before the Government Accountability Board because it's clear he is residing in Racine with his wife and kids there. That is where he goes. And in fact, it's within a few blocks of Senator John Lehman, who represents that district. So it was always surprising because he'd see him at the store, see him at the supermarket and think, well, what is he doing here? And I'm sure a lot of the people up in Door County, Kewaunee, and Brown, where he's supposed to represent, have been looking around and wondering where he is. He hasn't been there for 4 years. He's not living there. He's not representing them. So it's clear why he's been representing his own interests, the interests of special contributors, because he's not representing those folks up there. He's not even living up there. So that's Frank Lassay. Dean DeBrew is a strong candidate. Special education teacher, 20-year veteran of the Army Reserve, and somebody who's a strong voice for that district. Hunter Fisher, but not afraid to stand up to the gun lobby and asking for common sense reforms like universal background
Turning
checks.
to Western Wisconsin, how do you feel about the chances of beating Senators Moulton and Petrowski?
Yeah, I feel good. I mean, these are districts that are 50-50 seats. I'm sure they were held by Democrats just 4 years ago. The Moulton seat specifically was one that was held by Pat Kreitlow, and then above him, Jerry Petrowski. They had to switch out their Republican candidate because people were starting to realize she was just a Tea Partier, and now they've got Petrowski in there, but it's a seat that's been held by Democrats for over 20 years. They ended up trying to split it up and make it a little bit more Republican and adding Sawyer County, but our candidate, Paul DeMaine, is from that area. He's got a long work history. He's an employer there. He's a small business owner, and he grew up on the eastern part of that district, over on the other side by Wausau, and he's got that kind of appeal where it hits that conservative area because that's where he lives, works, and does business, but he also has connections back to the eastern part. So he's a strong, formidable candidate against Jerry Petrowski, and I think he's got a strong story to tell. He's somebody who's been unblinking, unwavering in standing up to this out-of-state mining company that's come in to try and destroy our state's environment. And I think that it's not just them that have to be worried, but Jerry Petrowski, because he is working so hard. And then down in the 23rd against Terry Moulton, you've got Phil Swanhorst, who's a small business owner for over 20 years, somebody who's also a bus driver, a blue-collar worker, who's a member of a union and isn't afraid to talk about it, despite the bullying by Scott Walker and his allies. So he's somebody who's standing up for his values, believing that we should be working to make sure everyone has access to the American dream, not just those who are the richest. So, I mean, that's our slate. These are strong candidates.
Are you going to be able to play defense in the Cullen and Jauch seats, Senator?
I think that those are strong already as Democratic seats. I mean, frankly, the Cullen seat is more Democratic than my own. It's over 60% performance. And I think they had to scramble just to get a name on the ballot. I don't even remember the guy's name. But at the end of the day, whoever comes out of that primary is going to do a really good job of representing the district as the next state senator.
Mary Burke is going to use the jobs and the economy, the failure to hit the 250,000 goal against Scott Walker. What are you telling? Your Senate races are regional races.
Yeah.
What are the issues? Do each of these districts have their own races, or are there common issues that your Democrats are going to run on?
Yeah, I mean, each of them are independent people. They're going to be able to talk about the issues that are most important to them. And I think if you listen to the biographies that I laid out, it's easy to see where folks are going to be talking about it. I mean, Martha Lanning, as a mother of three, is going to be talking about public education and how that's been decimated, how we saw the largest cut to education in state history and huge giveaways to unaccountable voucher schools. Folks like Paul DeMaine are going to talk about the environment and how we've been rolled back, how we don't have protections for the future of our state that we have had in a bipartisan way for generations. But I mean, overall, the things that folks are going to talk about, I think even appealing to conservatives is going to be key. Even though Scott Walker says he's cut spending, we are spending more now as a state than we ever have. So his ability to continue that lie and continue to be out there saying that, once people know the truth, it's hard for him to continue to get out there, despite him spending tens of $millions, despite him spending more than any candidate has in such a short time span in our state's history. We're borrowing more than we have in over 20 years. He's mortgaging off our future. And I think Democrat, Republican, Independent alike, they don't want to see that. They want to see somebody who's thinking long term. And given that the Republicans are just counting on coattails for coming up in for them for Scott Walker, because all they've done is rubber stamp his agenda, it's going to be hard for them to explain it when he's abandoning them just to look out for himself.
It's an off year from a presidential standpoint. Are you worried about a lower turnout hurting some of these candidates we've been talking about, Senator?
Well, here's the thing. If people are going to go to the ballot and they're upset with incumbents, there are Republicans in charge of the Senate, there are Republicans in charge of the Assembly, then there's a Republican in charge of the governor's mansion. So if folks are upset at incumbents right now, the only people to throw out are the Republicans who've been in charge of our state that have taken us to 35th in the nation in job growth. That have, where Walker has barely even hit half. I don't even think he's hit half of what his job goal was, because he's more worried about his own political long-term future. So I think people who are going to be upset are going to vote against the party in power, and that's been the Republicans.
Today's ruling by federal Judge Crabb that overturned the same-sex constitutional ban.
Yeah.
Is that going to be a major issue in some of these campaigns we've been talking about, Senator?
Well, I think it'll be one that Republicans like to dodge. A lot of them don't want to talk about this because they were there in the Senate or the Assembly fighting to try and make sure that people were excluded from the right to marry the person that they love. And that's something that has, at the time, they thought was politically advantageous, and now here they are 8 years later, and history is looking and staring them in the eye and saying, well, where do you stand on it now? And they're not ready to blink. They're not ready to back away from that backwards-looking view of how marriage is. I mean, getting the state involved in deciding who can marry who, that's just something that's going to be something for the history books, a scar that still exists in our state's constitution. We fought to make sure that we were going to put that forward as an amendment to our state's constitution, and we were going to be unblinking, unwavering in making sure that we continue to do that, because it's the right thing to do. Regardless of where it is politically, it's it's one of these things where at the heart of the matter, it's moving the arc of civil justice towards granting more liberties to people, granting people the right to marry who they choose, not trying to stand in the way of that. So it'll be interesting to see if they decide to actually stand up and say what they believe in this, because it's becoming so much more unpopular and because it's looking like something that belongs more in a history book than on a piece of campaign literature.
If Chairman Tater, you were right, and Democrats run the state Senate, how are you going to run it differently than the last 2 years, sir?
Well, I was, than the last 2 years?
Or last 2 or 4?
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, for one, we're going to make sure we're increasing funds for education. The investment in all kids' futures, I think, is important. You can cut education and say you're saving money, but in the long run, we're losing out. You're not going to be able to have kids who, if they can't read, if they're being held behind, they're going to be able to function and be able to run our state and be leaders. So we're going to invest in education again. We're going to make sure that the Department of Commerce is not just up to one person and his cronies, steering money towards his allies and steering it away from areas where it's needed. We're going to make sure there's more transparency in our government again. That's something that's been sorely lacking over the last few years. And I think we're going to roll away from the transactional nature of state government that we've had. I think a lot of people on both sides of the aisle get frustrated with that when Walker's best excuse is saying, well, we saw this happen before. Republicans saying, well, this has happened before, so we're just going to continue down this path. That we're going to take a bold step forward and say we're going to change how things have been done, and we're going to move forward on a strong progressive agenda, and we're also going to open up state government for everybody so that it's accessible not just to those with the largest checkbooks, but to the average person who's been cut out of the process the last 4 years.
So you're looking forward to this campaign season, bring it on, huh?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We've been out there, we've got great candidates, been out there knocking on doors for some of them, and we're looking forward to getting the majority this fall.
Democratic Senate Leader Chris Larson, thanks for talking to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you, anytime.
Have a good convention.
Thanks.
Thank you.